So we're just waiting for it to go live and then. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So good morning. I'm Councillor Philip Davis and we'll be chairing this hearing of Subcommittee A of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee of Birmingham City Council today. Before we start, could you all please mute your microphones for the moment so we can improve the sound quality while I talk about procedure, and all but the committee members, if you could please turn off your cameras, that will also assist with bandwidth. Usually committee members will have their cameras switched on throughout the hearing. And again, could people please put mobile phones on silent, ensure you're in a room that is free from distractions, etc. That will help process. It's very important, obviously, given the nature of the hearing today, that everyone who involved can hear and make representations and can hear the members of the subcommittee and officers. If there are any substantial distractions, the meeting could be suspended temporarily or to another date and time under the regulations for these types of meetings. I also confirm this is a public meeting and is therefore being live streamed on the City Council's website so that the general public can view it. It has a formal agenda as follows. Item 1, notice of recording webcast. I advise the meeting to note that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in the agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Item 3, apologies and notification of nominee members. There have been no apologies and no substitutions today. Item 4, minutes. To confirm and sign the minutes of the meetings held on 26th of July 2021, 10 o'clock, and 26th of July noon, and to note the public part of the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of August 2021, to confirm and sign the minutes of the meetings held on 6th of September 2021, to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of September 2021 at 1:30, and to note the public part of the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of November 2021, 11:30 hours. Colleagues, can we agree those minutes as a correct record? Is that agreed? Agreed. I see colleagues are nodding, so they have agreed. So thank you for that. So can I then welcome you to this hearing for an application for a review in respect to the licence for Elite Bar and Lounge, 51 St George's Street, Hockley, Birmingham B19 3QU. As I said at the beginning, my name is Councillor Philip Davis. I'm chairing the meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee A today. With me are two other members of the subcommittee, Councillors Martin Straker-Welds and Councillor Bob Beecher. Also present in this meeting are the following officers: the Licensing Officer, Bapinda Nandra, Committee Manager, Mr. Katie Townsend, and the Committee Lawyer, Ms. Joanna Swampilai. And also, we obviously have representations from various parties. So firstly, I'll ask you just to speak up to confirm you're here. The applicant for the review, West Midlands Police. I understand Mr. Ben Reader, PC Ben Reader, is with us today. PC Reader?
Yeah, morning Chair, PC Reader here today.
Thank you very much. And next we have West Midlands Fire Service, and that's Mr. Neil Aston Boff. Mr. Boff?
Confirmed attendance, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And next, we have the licence holder and their representative, represented by Mr. Heath Thomas. Mr. Thomas?
Good morning. So you can now see on screen that I'm here with my client, Christina Preston.
Okay, thank you. You're slightly off to the side of the screen, actually, both of you. But can I welcome you and welcome Miss Preston? That's right, we can see you now. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, thank you for that. And could I at this stage ask if any persons making representations wish to withdraw their representations at this stage of the hearing? PC Reader?
No, Chair, not withdrawing, thank you.
Mr. Aston Boff?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think Mr. Malley is with us yet. Okay. Thank you for that. So I will assume all parties have read and understood the Licensing Committee's procedural rules sent out with the notice of today's hearing. Please note that given the nature of today's proceedings online, I may at my discretion amend the procedural rules to reflect the fact that the meeting is taking place online. But I want to assure you that any such amendments will not impact on the party's right to a fair hearing. We'll be using the chat function in Microsoft Teams as an aid to communication. And one of the icons on your toolbar is a speech bubble. I think we're all quite familiar with this these days. And could you all confirm you've got the chat function and type your names into the chat, as this assists our record keeping. So I'm doing that now. And if we could all do the same, that will, as I say, assist us in terms of the record of the meeting. Okay, I see everybody's doing that. Thank you. Okay, so back to the main screens. As best I can. Yes, there we are. Thank you very much for that. You can, of course, communicate in the normal way, just indicate or speak up. But if you could keep the chat facility open throughout the meeting, that will assist the process of communication today. I don't think anybody's dialed in by audio telephone, so we don't have that issue. And again, can I say, with the exception of committee members, if you would keep your camera off unless you're speaking, that will assist the process. And if there are problems with bandwidth with the sound, I may ask everyone to turn their cameras off, as we find that this often helps resolve the problem. So I now come to preliminary points. Does anyone wish to make a preliminary point at this stage? And these are normally to do with procedure, but obviously we're open to any preliminary points. So does anybody have a preliminary point? Mr. Thomas?
So no preliminary points at this stage.
No. PC Ben Reader?
No, thank you, Chair.
Mr. Aston-Boff?
None, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And so now back to procedure. Firstly, I'm going to ask the licensing officer, Mr. Bindandra, to present his report. And then the applicant will be asked to present their case, West Midlands Police, and also the fire service. Those making representations are asked to keep their remarks to a limit of around 20 minutes. Then the licence holder will be invited to make their case, and again approximately 20 minutes will be allowed for that part of the hearing. And again, if all parties can speak clearly, precisely to aid communication online, also because the officers are taking minutes by hand as part of the meeting. And again, if it's somebody else's turn to speak, it helps if you can mute your microphone to prevent feedback. Questions and cross-examination. Please note that members of the subcommittee will be able to ask questions at any stage, but we'll try to do so at the conclusion of each presentation. Cross-examination by the applicant and those making representations will not be permitted unless the members consider it appropriate. Where questions are raised by members of the subcommittee or by those present, they must. We can also rely on the chat facility if there's any difficulty in communicating. And the chat facility will be monitored by the officers in case I miss any points people want to know. But if at any point in the meeting you wish to speak, communicate in the normal way or use the chat facility as backup. If at any point you're having difficulties hearing, please indicate this as best you can. Again, you may want to use the chat facility to do that. If there's a problem caused with the communication, then I may hold the live stream until that matter's rectified, and then continue, after that point. It may be that it's caused by people still having their microphones on. So back to that etiquette point about having the microphones off and having the cameras off when others are speaking. Thank you for that. We may, as a committee, occasionally need to adjourn for the subcommittee to take legal advice. So I may, at my discretion, then ask all parties to wait in the meeting while members and the relevant officers withdraw to take that advice using a separate meeting within Microsoft Teams. We'll then return to this meeting and continue. And as I said, if any time the live stream being broadcast on the City Council website fails, I'll ask you all to mute your microphones and cameras and to stop speaking until the live stream is restored. If at any time the meeting goes into private session, we'll pause that live stream, and then once the private parties are, we'll ask the meeting manager to reconfirm the live stream. At the conclusion of the hearing, I'll invite all parties to make a brief closing submission. We'll allow around 5 minutes for that. And then I stress no decision will be taken until all the evidence has been heard. At the decision-making stage, the members and the relevant officers will withdraw from this meeting in order to determine the decision. They'll go into a separate Microsoft Teams meeting. In the event that members need to clarify any point, you will be telephoned by the meeting manager. So that's the procedure, that's the process. So what I'd like to do now is to ask the licensing officer, Mr. Nandra, to present his report, please. Mr. Nandra.
Thank you, Chair. West Midlands Police applied on the 2nd of November 2021 for a review of the premises licence under Section 51 of the Licensing Act 2003 for Elite Bar and Lounge, 51 St George's Street, Hockley, Birmingham, B19 3QU. The purpose of the report is to consider an application to review a premises licence. A representation has been received from West Midlands Fire Service as a responsible authority, which is attached at Appendix 1. Representations have been received from other persons, which are attached at Appendices 2 to 7. The review application is attached at Appendix 8, and the premises licence is attached at Appendix 9. It should be noted that at the time of publication of this report, a designated premises supervisor was not assigned to the licence to authorise the sale of alcohol. It is an offence for the licence holder to sell alcohol without a DPS being appointed. Site location plans are attached at Appendix 10. When carrying out its licensing functions, a licensing authority must have regard to Birmingham City Council's statement of licensing policy and the guidance issued by the Secretary of State under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003. The licensing authority is also required to take such steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. The options available to the subcommittee today are to modify the conditions of licence, exclude a licensable activity from the scope of the licence. Sorry, Chair, bear with me. Remove the designated premises supervisor, suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, revoke the licence, or to take no action. Where the authority takes a step to modify conditions or exclude a licensable activity, it may provide that the modification or exclusion is to have effect for only such period not exceeding 3 months as it may specify. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nandra. So I now move to PC Ben Reader for West Midlands Police. PC Reader.
Morning, Chair. Thank you. Right, I think camera's on. Hopefully you can you see me now, Chair?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Excellent. So normally I would be at police headquarters doing this in an office. Apologies, I'm not. I'm in the dining room. I don't have a professional backdrop like the fire service or Heath Thomas, so apologies for that. And there are also children in the house, so if there's any screaming or anything at any point and you need me to repeat or clarify something, then please do shout up, and I'm more than happy to do so.
Don't worry about any of that. That sounds exactly like my circumstance, except it's grandchildren in that case.
Excellent. Okay, understood. Thank you. I've submitted the police evidence. I've looked through the CMIS documents. I've had correspondence with Heath Thomas. That email I haven't seen in the CMIS bundle, so I'm not going to refer to that in detail. However, there has been I think I forget the wording of it. It's a operations and issue resolution plan that's been sent to me that I have had sight of. I'm sure Mr. Thomas will go through that in detail during his presentation. So I don't propose to read every word of the bundle that I've submitted, but I will just present some of the more salient points to you, councillors. So if I go to take you through my witness statement then, so page 1 of the police evidence bundle that's been submitted, which details that the paperwork was signed up by Chief Superintendent Graham, and I then explained that in March of this year, the landlord separated the building and split the premises into a licensed supermarket on the ground floor and elite lounge on the upper floor. What this did was significantly reduce the capacity of the club that was there prior, and the thought process was that a reduction in capacity would lead to a reduction in the amount of incidents and the amount of demand to the police. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. There have been a number of reasons why there were a fall off in demand at that location, namely COVID and restrictions that have been in place. However, there has been a number of incidents there, which I will go through. I've also put on here that the ownership of the Citadel Music Group has changed, and the director of that company is now Christina Preston, and I have met with Christina and Heath Thomas, who's her solicitor. I think it's really important to clarify that, because that there has been a change of ownership during this process. There has been a period of closure, and I completely acknowledge that. I just want to take you through what's brought us up to this situation that we find ourselves in today. So, as a licensing officer, I've had referrals from other officers in relation to this premises. So on the 2nd of August, Temporary Sergeant Adam McWalter, who is the Aston Neighbourhood Sergeant, so he's the sergeant with geographical ownership of where this premises lies. So any issues that would be raised there would go to him as the local sergeant. So he's sent me some correspondence saying that he's concerned about incidents that have gone on there. And he states, I'm genuinely concerned that if something isn't done with the location sooner rather than later, then the incidents are only going to escalate in severity. It used to be called Truth Nightclub, and believe it was closed down for similar reasons, although I may be wrong. That's what he sent across to me. The following day, I was contacted by Detective Constable Gemma Lucas, who was investigating a firearms incident in a different part of Birmingham. However, the work that they'd done in that investigation led them to trace it back to an incident that occurred at Elite earlier in the evening, with a member of door staff reportedly having a knife produced to him. CCTV viewed by DC Lucas shows customers and a member of door staff running away from a male who's believed to have a weapon on them. DC Lucas made inquiries of local businesses, and then she's raised a number of complaints with me linked to Elite regarding litter, vehicles being left in the road obstructing entrances and exits to business premises, and staff members being abused on their way into or out of work. There were some inquiries that were made around the ownership of Elite, and a meeting was held at the premises on the 26th of August, and that was with Adam McWalter, the local sergeant, myself and Chris from the licensing team, and we met Camille, who was the DPS, Brian, who was a manager there, and a DJ called Section 8 Sam. It was quite a lengthy meeting, and we talked through a number of the issues that had been raised to us with local businesses, etc. We talked through some of the crimes, we talked through ASB, we talked through smoking and shisha and compliance. We talked about the capacity, and what we did is we went through all of the conditions that were on the licence. We read them out one by one to make sure that the DPS understood what that condition meant and how that they would comply with it. So I followed that meeting up with an email, which I've exhibited as BR1. So in my bundle, that's on page 4, which is just a confirmation of that meeting and some of the things that were discussed at that meeting. As I say, that was the 26th of August. On the 29th of August, Sergeant McWalter sent me an email detailing a visit that his team had made to the premises, which was just 2 days after the meeting that we'd had. This is exhibited as BR2, which is on page 5 of my bundle. I'm sure that you've had opportunity to read this, councillors, but just to pick up on a few things on there. The DPS wasn't present, but Brian was. They told us that they weren't doing shisha. We walked in at the bottom of the stairs, they were prepping shisha. We went upstairs and there were probably 40 plus people present. At a fair few tables, there were shisha bongs. These were all using coals. I think that's important that they're using coals, because we've made the distinction between a vape shisha and a coal shisha, and the difference in terms of the regs around vaping versus actually smoking and using coals. He then said, as they were leaving, there were approximately 20 more people queuing. So he's raised issues over the shisha and the potential for the capacity at that location. On the 3rd of September, I sent an email to chase up the premises. I had not been sent any of the policies to update me in order that they would comply with their licence conditions. I've exhibited this as BR3. And then on the 3rd of September, I was also sent an email from Adam McWalter again, detailing 2 robbery offences linked to the premises. And on the Sunday, he sent me a further email saying that he'd done another walkthrough at around 1:30 hours on the morning of Sunday the 5th. Again, there were breaches of capacity at the venue, as well as shisha being consumed. That's exhibited as BR4, which you'll find on page 7. So,
is that AM or PM?
Sorry?
At 1:30, was it AM or PM?
Yes, 01:30 AM, 1:30 in the morning, councillor, when that visit took place. So Saturday night going into the Sunday morning, that's on page 7. That's from Sergeant McWalter. So he said, as we arrived, security were dealing with a drunk person who was trying to get in, they refused an entry to. We diffused that, spoke to Camille, took me and the team inside. Shisha pipes were being made up with coals, which set out the stall for what I was about to see upstairs. I would estimate there was somewhere in the region of 100 to 120 people inside, a mixture of standing, sitting and dancing. A number of shisha bongs on the tables, again all with coals. Camille admitted there were far more than the 60-person capacity. Apparently they've been trying to get Westminster Fire Service for a risk assessment to confirm numbers, but hadn't been able to up until now. I think we're going to hear from the fire service around that capacity issue and the numbers that are, which is actually a condition on the licence, I believe. He said that they should only be using electronic shisha, but the sergeants challenged him and said that that clearly wasn't the case. So I think that we've been back and found further breaches just a short period of time after having that conversation with the premises. Following that, Adam McWalter has sent a number of emails detailing further offences or logs linked to that location. On the 28th of October, there was further correspondence between myself and the DPS about review paperwork that was being submitted. And Camille at that point sent an email saying he was no longer the DPS and that he'd already resigned. And I've exhibited that as BR6. On the 5th of November, I received an email from John Leese, a police staff investigator. He was investigating a Section 18 assault that took place outside the premises in the early hours of Saturday morning. And I've exhibited that as BR7, so that's on page 10, and that's just around them trying to get access to the CCTV following a nasty Section 18 that happened outside in the early hours of Saturday morning. We're not having any joy getting any CCTV. I understand from talking to Amy and from our own personal experience last year, this isn't the only occasion where officers have had difficulty getting CCTV. So we then put them in contact through Heath so that we could get that CCTV. Then on the 8th of November, Sergeant Boff in Digbeth raised a further wound in the premises where a customer had been stabbed during a disorder. Exhibit BR8 is an overview of crime numbers and log numbers with brief details of the incident and the timing. So I'll go on to that last. Since the review process has started, the venue was voluntarily closed, which I take as a positive. This has led to no further incidents or crimes being recorded. So when the premises is closed, we don't have incidents, which speaks for itself, but it's obviously positive because it's reducing less demand at that location, and I'm sure the local businesses and residents are happier that there have been no incidents at that location. The venue's caused significant demand on police resources due to the amount of incidents linked to patrons of the venue. The levels of crimes recorded show that significant injury has been caused. Obviously, those are leading to investigations and further officer time investigating those offences and then putting those before a court. So West Midlands Police believe that the premises needs a complete concept change and overhaul of operations if it intends to continue to operate as a licensed premises and promote the licensing objectives. So what I'm suggesting, councillors, is that the licensing objectives aren't or haven't been promoted to the extent that the only way we can safeguard what's happening there is by revoking the licence or a complete concept change in terms of hours, type of operations, etc., and the way that everything is managed there. Exhibit VR8, which is at the end, which is page 11 and 12, that details the offences that have taken place there since July. And as you can see, I'm not going to go through every single offence, councillors. I'm sure you've had plenty of time to read this, but we've got threats to kill, section 18, where someone's been stabbed, 47 assault, theft from the person, robbery, theft from the person, harassment, alarm, distress, wounding, 18. So there's a number of serious offences that are linked to this location. Having looked through the evidence bundle, it puts into pictures some of the conversations that I've had with local businesses. There's been a lot of email back and forth with local businesses who have been making complaints about this location. I've been very careful what I've said to them, because I would not want to be accused of colluding with local businesses or encouraging people to make representations. I've explained the process to them and left that up to themselves. But it's clear that a number of interested persons or businesses nearby have felt strongly enough that they've wanted to make those representations. I've looked through those emails, and in particular for me, it's the photographs that have been, the stills from the CCTV that are on page 32, I believe, of the CMIS pack, which just shows the extent of the gatherings outside. Judging by the light, I'm going to assume that that's very early in the morning. This premises is a late night venue, so I would expect it to be in darkness unless it was very early in the morning when this was taking place and the sun had come up and we've got people outside sort of 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I think that's of particular concern, because those businesses will have staff members starting early doors, and those staff members are coming to work to start their working day and having to come past this mass of people that are in the road, vehicles that are parked everywhere. They're not feeling safe, and that seems particularly unfair on those businesses, to the point that they have made those representations. Councillors, I've gone through the evidence that I prepared. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much, PC Reader. So, Councillor Beecham, have you got any questions?
These reports that are coming in to you, how are you receiving them? How are they put before you, if you like?
Okay, so the reports in terms of from local businesses have been made to investigating officers who've been doing CCTV trawls on the back of incidents that have taken place there. So if we have a crime that we're made aware of or a victim reporting that, officers have then, from our investigations team, have gone out and canvassed locally for CCTV to investigate that offence. And then when they've been doing that, they've been made aware of the complaints relating to that licence. That's led to them emailing me saying, Ben, you're the licensing officer. Are you aware of these issues that are taking place at this location?
Okay, Councillor Beecham.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Straker-Wells, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, yes, please. You mentioned the need for a complete concept change because the licensing objectives had not been met. And you also itemised quite a lot of incidents: stabbings, assaults, harassment, wounding, gathering at 5 in the morning. My question really is, given the amount of time the police appears to have been at this particular premises, have you seen any learning going on? Have you actually seen any improvements as a result of all that? Or are you suggesting that things have not actually in any shape or form got better?
It's a very difficult question for me to answer, and I'm sure Mr. Thomas will have an answer prepared for that question, Councillor. In all fairness, what I can say is, since the engagement process with Mr. Thomas and the new director of the company, the premises has been closed. That's been done voluntarily, and therefore there have been no crimes at this location since that voluntary closure has been put into place. My concern is around if it's allowed to reopen, if it operates in a similar vein to how it has been, attracting the same or similar customers, are we going to have a return to what we've had pre-closure?
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. On the shisha issue, PC reader. Now, the issue here, you imply is, you state is that this is indoor shisha, which would breach presumably the smoking legislation.
Yes, absolutely. The premises isn't compliant with. It hasn't got the 50% open sides on the upper floor. So this has been discussed with the premises. The premises, and when I say the premises, this is with the old operator, not with Christina, but the old operator acknowledged that the premises were not shisha compliant and that they would not allow people to smoke shisha. However, when officers have gone in, that clearly hasn't been the case. And there's an email from Camille saying this was, although we know we shouldn't have done it, we allowed it to honour a pre-existing contract with a client who'd booked the premises. So there was an acknowledgement that shouldn't have been done. However, it went ahead on 2 occasions when the police happened to visit, and that's 100% breach. If officers had gone in on other times, I'm sure that it would have continued to be breaching based on that evidence. Both times we visited, they were breaching. So it's fair to say that that premises serves shisha. And again, Mr. Thomas has made comment of that in his resolution. I want to get the correct term, operations and issue resolution plan, that there is comment on shisha within that, and I'll leave that for him to discuss with yourselves.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. I think those are the members' questions, so thank you very much for that. Okay, so we'll now move on to West Midlands Fire Service and Mr. Aston-Boff. So, Mr. Aston-Boff.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, in relation to the new operator, West Midlands Fire Service haven't engaged with the new operator yet. We weren't aware until recently that the operator has changed. It's probably due to matters within the Licensing Act where we don't necessarily get consulted with a change of operator, whereas the police would. So just to give some context, the premises generally have caused historic issues for West Midlands Fire Service and for public safety, requiring intervention. Previously, in 2017, the premises had a restriction notice when it was the previous nightclub served, but some remedial works were carried out. And following the recent application, the premises was instructed to make a building regulations application, or the previous occupier was, to include, as part of that application, the reinstatement of an external fire escape, which had been cut off halfway down. The fire escape has been reintroduced, but building regs officer has been out to look at that work as it comes under the scope of the building regulations, and has confirmed to us that work is substandard, as the welding was poor. And building regs still haven't received the application for completion of that work. So we have concerns the external fire escape may be in an unsafe condition still. We did have a capacity figure placed upon the licence as a condition, following its recent application in March or April, I believe, this year, owing to only one alternative fire exit other than the exit that I've just spoken about, and the capacity for the first floor was set at 60 persons until such time that West Midlands Fire Service are satisfied that the capacity for the premises can be increased. We've had no contact since our last visit with the premises. We've been waiting for them to get back to us and waiting for them to put in the application for the building regs process, so that alternative exit can be reintroduced. We fully support the West Midlands Police in their objectives, and are further concerned hearing the information today that the premises have been over-occupied. that is a safety issue. I mean, 60 people is the maximum that any guidance suggests could be housed in a premises with only one fire escape for obvious reasons. People may not be able to get out of the premises quickly enough. And the fact that they are still continuing to use shisha and shisha coals, which are known to be a contributor to fire in those types of premises. A number of them have burnt down, unfortunately. So that gives us greater concern. So we reinforce our support for their objectives, even if that means revocation of the licence in this instance. Clearly, the premises were aware of the licence conditions and carried on to flout that really, and to over-occupy the premises, which in my opinion would have been a dangerous condition. So we're not seeking the addition of conditions upon the licence, because we already have a condition which deals with that matter. But we do certainly want to reinforce that with the new occupier, and we'd ask that the hearing instruct the current premises licence holders to provide suitable contact details, including current names of the operating company, names of directors, contact numbers, suitable email addresses, so that we can make contact for the future if the premises remains open to further deal with these issues and carry out any further inspections we might need to carry out. And that's the basis of our review, really, or certainly our support of the review, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Aston-Boff. Councillor Straker-Wells, have you got any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, please, if I may. You've been clear about the capacity. I think 60 was set. You've been clear about the need for a fire escape. And you've also been clear about the fact that the fire escape that was reinstated was substandard, forgive me. Public protection and public safety is obviously one of the key elements in licensing. Did you feel that the premises were in any shape or form clear about what was required, or are you suggesting that they may have been clear about what's required, they simply didn't do anything about it?
I haven't inspected the premises personally. I haven't spoken with the previous premises licence holder personally, but I have had a detailed conversation with the officer that couldn't attend today that did, and I have thoroughly read his notes on the matters. They just haven't got back. They've left it at that. We've gone out and said, we've gone out with the building control officer, a joint inspection, agreed that it was substandard, and they really needed to get this application, and they really need to sort out the issue of the fire escape, and they shouldn't use it. But they haven't got back to us regarding the building regulations application. I haven't spoke to the building control officer today. There may be a different situation I'm not aware of, but to date, that's the latest information, that there's been no building regulations application made that considers that step and the reinstatement of it, or staircase rather. And as far as we're aware, the matters are still substandard and haven't been resolved.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beecham.
Can you enlarge on the necessity for 2 fire exits there?
There are various requirements within current guidance, including the building regulations and including the government's guidance to fire risk assessment. One of the very basic premises within all of that guidance is that if a premises only has 1 fire escape, then the premises must be limited to no more than 60 people. That's for a normal risk premises, shall we say. The guidance then goes on to say this is dependent upon the risk. Having heard today's submission from the police regarding the shisha, you could take a different view as a risk assessor and decide to decrease that number slightly. But certainly 60, whether it's high risk or low risk, is the maximum capacity for 1 fire exit.
Thank you. What has brought the fire brigade's attention to the premises originally?
Originally, we were involved in the premises back in 2017 following an audit, whereas we had to close down the premises. It did get reopened when certain works had been reintroduced to reduce the immediate risk. But the most recent intervention was down to the premises licence application back in April. When we would have visited as a matter of course because of that application.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. Okay, so I don't think there's anything for me. So thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Astonboff, and you get a chance to sum up at the end. Thank you. Okay, so I don't think again Mr. Hiramali is here, so I don't think we have any other presentations other than from the representative of the licence holder. So I will now move to Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas, would you like to address us?
Thank you, Chair. So can I firstly say you've heard from Ben Reader about the change in director, is what he said to the committee. Sitting next to me is Christina Preston. Christina Preston purchased the premises licence holding company in late October 2021, just before the police commenced their review proceedings. The company's house forms, which I have had sight of, are dated the 22nd of October 2021. It's not simply a case here where I have somebody who is stepping in as a newly appointed director. This is where I have somebody who's bought the shareholding in a business. And in normal circumstances, it's often where one business buys another. You have the transfer of the license from one operator to the new operator that comes in. Here, where somebody buys the legal entity, buys the shareholding, so the legal entity itself, that legal person being the company, stays the same. Miss Preston has not been required then to do a transfer of the license. And so that opportunity to immediately engage at the time of the transfer hasn't arisen. But Miss Preston is the new owner of this business, and she has no association either by way of employment or management or operation of the company before she purchased it. Now, she saw this as an opportunity and purchased the business without any knowledge of what was going on in the minds of West Midlands Police at that time. And she saw this as an opportunity to develop her own business in an area of Birmingham that she believes is going to be gentrified and in her own instructions to me, become like the Shoreditch of Birmingham. And if those of you that might be familiar with London, you'll know the expression that I'm making. And so in terms of her involvement, she comes with clean hands to the table and hasn't had the history of dealings with this premises. And in terms of our engagement, we have engaged fully with PC Reader at West Midlands Police. And I'll come on to the fire service separately, but I apologise to the fire service that I hadn't engaged with you previously, and you'll learn why in a moment. But in terms of West Midlands Police, my client assumed that legal entity, assumed the staff that went along with that legal entity, and her original intention was to trade the premises until the close of the Christmas period, and in accordance with its conditions of its license, with which she familiarised herself, and then to close the premises at the start of the new year, when they would be closed for a period of time, undergo a refurbishment, a change of name, and her new business would then come from that. Now, what Miss Preston did immediately, we became aware of West Midlands police proceedings, is that she instructed me. And I immediately engaged with PC Reader. And we had a meeting which we had hoped was going to be a face-to-face meeting. And for reasons of illness, that couldn't be. It was an electronic video meeting like we're having today. But that is a meeting that did took place where PC Reader was able to share with us his concerns about the history of the business, and in similar terms set out to us what he set out to you this morning. And immediately following that meeting, it's correct to say that my client decided that the best course of action for these premises was to close them with immediate effect, which she did. And she closed the premises, which for her ruled out all the possibility of economic gain in the Christmas period. We weren't in the Omicron discussions that we're in today, where we might be looking at closure. This was at a time when it thought that as a hospitality sector, she would be operating a business successfully pending its closure and rebranding and reopening. But she took the decision of her own volition that the history of the premises and what had gone on before with some of the staff that she'd inherited was not acceptable. And she closed her business with immediate effect. And that was then reported immediately through to PC Reader as the action that she'd taken. Now, I would be submitting to members of this panel that shows the measure of Christina Preston as the new owner of this business. And it's her intention that these premises will remain closed, certainly until February 2022, if the licensing committee are with us. And there are a number of reasons for that. The initial reason is that these are premises which do, and we agree with West Midlands Police, they do need a change in concept. And you've heard from PC Reader that these are premises that have been well known and associated with being shisha premises operating within the city. And as a licensing committee, and some of you who I've been before on many occasions before, we will know sometimes the problems that are associated with those types of premises when we come to discuss them before the committee. My client does not propose to operate these as shisha premises, has never done so, and in fact ceased that immediately. And with her premises being closed and what would almost be a 3-month gap before she would intend to reopen, then we have had a sufficient long period of time for individuals to look for premises elsewhere that they might like to go, but certainly they wouldn't be returning to these premises for shisha, because that simply is not going to be part of the concept moving forward. And that is a significant change. In terms of the other concerns that are being raised, then very much so what my client instructs me is that when we've read through the concerns expressed by PC Reader, and PC Reader repeated in his application that West Midlands Police had concerns at that time with the owners and management of those licensed premises. And Miss Preston, when she reads that, agrees absolutely, and she's quite shocked that this is something that was allowed to happen in a business that she went on to acquire, and certainly those dealings had not been disclosed to her previously. But she is in control, as has been borne out by the fact that she's closed the premises and some of the things that she's done since. So just in terms of what her intentions are, as I have said to you already, maintaining the premises as being closed, likelihood is that that will be closed for a period of 3 months in its entirety. The staff that were employees, there were 2 full-time employees and at least 5 on 0 hours contracts. All of those members of staff have been let go. Their contracts have been terminated. Some because clearly those that would have performed a position as designated premises supervisor and other management position clearly aren't suitable to carry out and meet the conditions of a premises license. So she would be looking at a new members of staff when she would reopen and a new designated premises supervisor. And of course, that would be a discussion to be had with the licensing authority and West Midlands Police. There was a security company under contract with the former owner of this business. It's clear on my client's own interpretation of what's gone on and discussions with West Midlands Police that they were not either adequately managed or performing their roles and responsibilities effectively. Otherwise, the concerns that are expressed by local businesses wouldn't be shared before you in the correspondence. And so that contract has been terminated. My client's already begun preparations in terms of what would happen in 2022 if she's permitted to keep this premises license. And she has already engaged with Safety Net Security Company. They are an operator that's well known and well respected within the city, known to West Midlands Police. And that's a conversation that I've already shared with PC Reader, who expresses no concerns about their ability to help operators meet the licensing objectives when dealing with their roles in security and door supervision. The meeting that my clients had with Safety Net Security deal with such things as deployment plans. How many staff would be engaged at the premises? Where would they be deployed at various stages of the evening? That's at the front of the premises when people are entering. And of course, again, when people are leaving the premises, that important element of dealing with dispersal. And my client recognises that clearly dispersal has been an issue from this venue in the past. It's not one that she wants to repeat going forward. And so she is working and will work with Safety Net Security to ensure that we have an adequate dispersal policy and not simply when the premises closes its doors at the end of an evening, that the door supervisors leave also, that they are around sufficiently to ensure that people have moved away from the vicinity of the premises so as not to give rise to nuisance either to people who are going to their businesses or local residents. She's been to the area and she's seen conditions on the licence that talk about requirements to deal with litter, and she's very content. Now, her premises, it's not a takeaway premises. She is not going to permit customers to remove bottles or glasses from her premises, and neither does she sell food that is then taken away for consumption from her premises. And while she can do her utmost to then ensure that no items are coming from her premises, she equally wants to make sure that she's a good neighbour with her business and is quite content for that condition on the premises licence that talks about litter picking to be remain on the licence. She is content to ensure that everything within her control within the immediate vicinity of her premises is therefore looked after, because she wants to be a good operator and a good neighbour to those other businesses and residents in the vicinity. And I think hopefully that begins to show to you as members of the committee the measure of Christina Preston, which I'm afraid, as I've said to you, she took no part in what Ben Reader has evidenced before you. Now, Ben did talk to you about matters that were on the 5th of November about an alleged assault that had taken place outside the premises. And it's true to say that Christina immediately engaged with PC Reader and his colleagues, and a time was arranged for the officers to go and visit the premises and inspect the CCTV, and that's something that did take place. And so this comment where an officer says to PC Reader, well, in the past, this venue hasn't been so good at providing its CCTV, already my client has demonstrated, again, this willingness to work with West Midlands Police and give up the information as and when required. And it was only in working with West Midlands Police that she took that decision, as I said to you at the very outset, to voluntarily close her premises, which is certainly a sensible proposition from her. Now, my clients looked at the various comments that the fire service and other interested parties make. In terms of the fire service, we're in complete agreement with the fire safety officer who speaks to you this morning. In terms of that, my client has seen the fire exit rather, and the fire staircase, and she's working with the landlord. She's a leaseholder of the business. She has taken on the lease that was held by that company that she's purchased. She has 10 years left of that lease, and she's working then with the landlord to remedy the fire exit. That's with the landlord as we speak, to ensure that we've got a properly designed staircase, and that application does correctly go then before building regulations to ensure that it is compliant. And I was talking to my client and saying, so you're well aware that there's a limit on occupancy in the premises of 60 persons until such time as the fire escape is put in place effectively. And she said, yes, she's very aware of that. However, she doesn't intend to open her premises until that element is actually rectified and done. So again, you can see the measure of Christina Preston as the premises license holder now. And so to the fire safety officer, my apologies for not speaking to you before today. You'll understand now that this is going on in the background with the landlord and plans and building regulations, and we'll have formal engagement with you that we'll take forward. In terms of contact details, then at the conclusion of this meeting, whichever way the meeting goes, I will ensure that you have the contact details for both myself and also for Christina Preston going forward, so that your records can be fully up to date moving forward. In terms of the other comments that you have before you, I think those are best summarised under a number of headings. One is one of littering, one of loitering or dispersal, one of car parking, one of violence that has occurred at or are in the vicinity of these premises, and issues of these being premises where smoking of shisha has been permitted. And if I may, I'm just going to address you on each of those separately. In terms of littering, my client is content, as I've already said, to ensure that they have a policy, irrespective of the fact that they have no bottles leaving and no food going out of their premises, to do litter patrols in the vicinity of their premises. And she's content for that to be on each evening the premises is open for licensed activity. She says that there will be bins by the doors, and staff will be instructed not to allow any persons to exit the premises with any receptacle. And that would remove that as a concern there. In terms of loitering or persons remaining in the vicinity of the premises at the end of an evening, then I've already mentioned to you that she's working with Safety Net to ensure that there is an effective and proper dispersal policy in place. We're very happy to share that with West Midlands Police, which would show both a deployment and a dispersal plan, so that they can be satisfied that, as I said to you earlier on, when the premises shut their doors, they're not closing their minds to what's going on outside. They are then dealing with the issues. Of course, in terms of shisha, this is not to be a shisha lounge, and those individuals that were attracted to the premises because of this historically would no longer be attracted to this premises on that very basis. And we're quite content for that to be a condition of this license, should you require. Having said that, my clients are aware and fully accept these premises are not even Health Act compliant anyway. So shisha, as far as she is concerned, is something that the former operators should never have engaged at in this premises, particularly coal shisha in any event. My client has been cognizant of some of the comments that have been made about car parking, and she's been around the vicinity of the premises and notes that there is no formal prohibition on parking. There's no yellow lines, for example, within this locality, but she's quite content to ensure that she has stewards that can monitor and notices at the entrance to her premises, reminding her customers to please park responsibly if they've come in a vehicle, and to be mindful of local neighbours and businesses. In terms of the neighbours, my client is very willing, before she opens, to meet with those that make representations to the licensing committee, so that they will know her as the person that's responsible for the venue, to share her contact details, and that's to discuss any concerns they have going forward before she would open, but equally to maintain dialogue with her and vice versa once her premises would be reopened, as I say, if the committee is with Miss Preston this morning. In terms of the violent incidents that have happened historically in the premises, my client is in some difficulty, as I say, to comment upon that not being involved historically. What she certainly feels is that her 3-month self-imposed closure is an adequate time limit for those individuals to separate themselves from these premises. In terms of the methods and matters that she will put in hand, she will have a search policy in place for her venue. That policy, we're again very content to share with PC Reader and his colleagues at West Midlands Police. And we were also content that we would want to use any metallic wands in our premises, such as we know that people are not coming into our premises with any weapons or metal objects. And that's a sensible measure for city premises. And it's my client looking at what has gone here in the past and making sure that there's a zero tolerance, as far as she's concerned, for anyone who might want to carry anything that may amount to a weapon. She also intends to have a dress code policy, which she will enforce and work with a security team to make sure that that is carried out. So I think in terms of fire and once a new staircase is approved and the appropriate permissions are in place, either through building regulation control and the comments from West Midlands Fire Safety Service, then of course a new fire risk assessment would be imposed, carried out rather, conducted, and then imposed in the premises. And again, that's something that Miss Preston is putting in place. There's been another comment made about loud music that was coming from the premises. One person mentions that. There is no comment here from environmental health, but as I say, my client is aware of any requirements when regulated entertainment is played for windows and doors to be closed, She's aware of her obligation not to cause noise nuisance to any neighbours, and she's very willing to work, as she said, and through me, with those to ensure that they don't experience public nuisance as a result of her operation of the premises. And very much so, in drawing these strands together, we agree with West Midlands Police. The matters that we're discussing this morning are very much due to the poor management and poor control of a former owner. And being made aware of that, Miss Preston wants to be able to demonstrate to this committee that these are premises that can very much be run and promote the licensing objective under her tenure. Can I just ask my client actually if there's anything actually I need to add if I've failed to mention anything? Can I just mute myself just for a moment, please?
Yes.
I think you might have seen my client saying to me that she doesn't think there's anything I've failed to mention so far in terms of the matters that we've had. The one thing actually my client has also mentioned in terms of her policies was making sure that she has a drugs policy in place in her venue to ensure that, again, there's zero tolerance in terms of that. So I think, members of the committee, hopefully I've made that very clear in terms of what my client has done so far. And hopefully members of the committee will take on board that she's looking forward, because for her, she has not been part of what's gone on before.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Obviously, you get an opportunity to sum up shortly. I'll go to members now for questions. Councillor Straker-Wells, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for giving us an insight into the different direction in which the new owner wishes to take the business. And I think you've made it very clear to us, or certainly to me, that you want a line to be drawn between what has happened before and the new business envisaged by the owner. However, there is a history. And the history is of breached conditions of the licensing objectives. And that has been going on for quite some time, and that's attached to some very serious issues for both local business and for the community. So my question really to you is, can you be absolutely certain that a 3-month self-imposed closure will be enough to exercise the ghosts which will be haunting this particular establishment, and indeed to inspire confidence in both local business and in the community, given what has happened before? Thank you, Chair.
Well, Councillor Straker-Wells, the answer to that is yes, we do believe it's a sufficient time. It's a significant period of time, taking out what would otherwise be the busiest time in any calendar for licensed premises. It gives my client an opportunity to meet with those interested parties so they can have that dialogue and share concerns that she can take on board. And it gives her an opportunity to making sure that sufficient gap is taken between what did take place here previously. I should also add, actually, that she would be looking, when she reopens the premises, to rename the premises. So we're removing completely any link to either the name of the premises and what went on there historically.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Beecham, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. Yes, several, to be honest. Particularly with the renaming, I was going to ask you that, whether you were going to divorce yourself completely from what previously took place. Other questions are, it seems so very strange someone would purchase the premises without the knowledge of what's gone on within that premises, and I wondered if you could give us some idea of Mrs. or Miss Preston's past, and is she a sole trader or is she part of a conglomerate, or where she's coming from, Is she local? Has she got sight of what takes place around that area and in that area, and has taken place within that area? And what her intention as a premises would look like. If you could please, I'd be grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Beecham. Back to you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much. So a number of questions there. So in terms of the renaming of the premises, yes, the intention is to completely divorce itself from anything that has gone on here previously. We have no links, and we will have severed all links with anyone who was either employed or engaged at the premises previously as well. And we're ensuring that we're doing that, and hence my comment to you earlier about terminating all staffs and contracts that were held previously. In terms of my client's background, my client is a sole director and sole owner of business. She's not part of a conglomerate. In terms of her background, she has worked within recruitment of the regulated sector, has dealt with the security sector, Security Industry Authority, and the training. She's often commissioning the training of those individuals who go on to train people in that sector. So she's well versed in dealing with a regulatory regime. And for her, she tells me the fact that there are conditions on a license, she understands that completely and understands the requirement to comply. She has worked historically in the license sector, working for some of the larger late night operators prior to going into recruitment and working in this regulated sector within recruitment. And this is now her own venture. So she's lived in London and Essex for some time, has a link to the West Midlands, perceives the part of the city, and I said to you earlier on, as being an area that will be gentrified as time goes on. She sees that as an opportunity for her to get a business and a foothold here in the early parts of that gentrification. And I said to you, she viewed it personally as, you know, the equivalent of a Shoreditch in this part of Birmingham. And sorry, I've lost myself for a moment, and if I've missed something, I don't know if you wanted to hear from Miss Preston at all in terms of what she wants it to look like. In terms of her next step is clearly she wants to refurbish these premises, and those are going to be cosmetic refurb. But first and foremost, it's important for her to deal with the structural elements, West Midlands Fire Service requirements, for example, and staffing, refurbishment, and to get her plans together for a future in 2022.
Does that answer your point, Councillor Beecham?
Yes, it does to a satisfactory degree. I still haven't heard what on earth made her not examine the surroundings and the history of the place.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. If you could expand on that.
Yes, yes, of course. So in terms of looking at the premises, they came with a premises license that permitted the works and the operation that she wanted to operate in terms of that. Her checks were about whether that license is extant, whether it's still live and operational, and if when you're doing a new business, what goes before you almost becomes irrelevant as to what goes under your own tenure and your own control. And it's unfortunate in terms of the company's house details were dealt with immediately before this, and the deal was already done. And it was 3 days later when West Midlands Police did that. I think with the benefit of hindsight, I think my client perhaps wishes that she had spoken to PC Reader before the 25th of November. But from a legal perspective, the legalities of her transaction were all there on the provenance of the license that was extant and in force at that time, with no record of any proceedings before the licensing authority. The licensing authority weren't aware at the same time as Miss Preston was dealing with her purchase of the company.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Councillor Beecham. Okay, so thank you very much. Is that your presentation, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. And so what we'll now move on to is the closing submissions. And firstly, I go to West Midlands Fire Service. Mr. Aston-Boff, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard the submission from the applicant through her representative, Mr. Thomas. It concerns me that the premises were allowed to operate in excess of the safe capacity when the premises licence holder was fully cognizant of their operating conditions, including the restriction of 60. That's a condition of the licence. I'd like to ask, or generally highlight to the applicant and ask why did you allow that occupancy to be quite clearly breached if you're aware of the condition, and secondly, you say you were aware of regulated regimes and you fully understand what needs to be done in terms of the regulations. Could I ask if you're aware of your legal requirements for the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order and the necessity to carry out a fire risk assessment, and was that in place for your business commissioned by yourself for those times that you were open and breaching the condition as well? I view this as quite a serious matter. It's historical. It appears to still be going on with the current operator. Hopefully that's going to change, and I fully hear that they want to engage with us to remedy matters, but matters have been the same for quite a considerable length of time now, and the premises still operated against licence conditions with those matters still in effect. So that gives me great concern. And the basis of my submission in supporting West Midlands Police is really based around those issues. Great that they're not going to operate as a shisha premises anymore if they continue to trade, but I would like some confidence that they will take account of their regulatory responsibilities and their legal requirements in the future. And we will be looking to have a meeting with them in the future going forward. I've no further comments to make really in terms of our submission, which you're really quite clear. But that is a question that if I'd had the opportunity to ask the applicant or the current premises licence holder, I would have asked.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll certainly give Mr. Heath Thomas leeway to respond in his summing up to those points as he wishes. Okay, on to West Midlands Police, PC Reader.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to what Mr. Thomas has said, and that it's as I expected really, that it would be a line drawn under matters, and that has happened prior under different ownership, and that those matters will not continue moving forward. I welcome the suggestion of the consultation and the additional policies that are being offered. But my concern is that I talked about either a revocation of when the venue isn't open, it's not generating crime and disorder. I've also talked about a concept change, and a concept change is a significant change in the way that a premises is operating. If we're still looking at operating to the same terminal hour, yet we're suggesting that we're going to have some attendants outside to monitor car parking, are we going to still attract the same clientele, and are we going to attract the same issues that those staff are just going to have to try and deal with? A concept change to me is more significant and substantial in terms of the way the premises would trade moving forward. Obviously the decision sits with the committee, but I don't feel that I've heard enough to suggest that a new concept is being suggested. I'm hearing that we're going to run it in a similar fashion, but with a much better manager and a much better set of policies. That's what I'm picking up from the presentation that's been made. I'm not really hearing about an overhaul in the way that the premises will operate. And as I said, my concern is that the same that this premises has a reputation, even if it does have a name change, that similar clientele will attend similar hours. You know, is it a late night premises that people are going to after visiting other premises? And those issues will continue for the local businesses, which will result in ASB and crime and disorder. Thank you.
Thank you, PC Reader. Thank you very much for that. So now, Mr. Thomas, your opportunity to sum up. And given some new matters were introduced, I'm happy on the fire matters for you to address those as you wish. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you. Well, I'm very grateful for the time the committee's given me, and I'm a little disappointed because I hear the comments of West Midlands Fire Safety Officer, and either he's mistaken as to what he's heard, or we just haven't been in part of the same meeting. It's been made very clear that my client has not operated these premises in breach of any fire safety, and any suggestions that were made and evidence that's before the committee predates my client's involvement. And the evidence that deals with overcapacity goes back to September 2021, when you have already heard from me that my client's involvement legally and operationally has come after the 22nd of October 2021. So I hope that that is simply a mistake, and perhaps the fire safety officer hasn't clearly taken that on board in the questions and the comments that he's made, because from Christina Preston's point of view, there have been no breaches of either capacity or fire safety under her tenure. And yes, in response to the question that the officer makes, is my client aware of her obligations under the fire reform order and her duty to have a fire risk assessment in place? The answer to that is emphatically yes, and she will comply. In terms of PC Reader's comments, again, PC Reader has said throughout his application and his submissions to this committee that the breach of the licensing objectives has arisen from poor management and lack of operational control historically. My client has demonstrated from the very outset her willingness and ability to engage with West Midlands Police and to take the necessary decisions to close her business, which impacts her financially, to ensure that her business is sustainable for the future. And in terms of the officer suggesting that he sees no significant or substantial change, there is naturally a significant and substantial change. Elite Lounge and Bar operated as a shisha lounge and bar, attracting people to its premises. We've heard in the evidence that's before you 40 plus people smoking within the premises in September 2021. Those premises operated as a shisha lounge. Miss Preston is not operating those premises as a shisha lounge, and never will she do so. She's quite content for any condition you wish to have imposed on the license to support that. That of itself is a significant change in what these premises have operated as. She set out her stock in terms of what she intends to do by way of management and engagement, and she wishes to have these premises. The only added point she said to me as an aside, which would be if this committee had such a concern about the use of her premises, she would be content for the committee to contemplate a last entry time, for example, on this licence of 3:30 a.m. And those are my client's instructions that have been borne out from listening to what's gone on here. But certainly, the officer has indicated that from their perspective, these are premises that from July and August 2021, in their own evidence, things had operated and quieted down. In July and August, things started going wrong, is the police evidence, and have gone wrong since. My client is not associated with that. She's clearly indicated her management skills in taking the appropriate decisions that she's taking, and I think she ought to be given that opportunity to demonstrate that she can promote the licensing objectives. She's well aware, sitting next to me and being before this committee, that if she doesn't do that, then the only outcome can be revocation. But then when there's no evidence against her tenure at these premises, then I think it's incumbent, when the committee applies the section 182 guidance of it's paragraph 1120 from recollection, it's looking at what is the root cause of a problem and only doing what is necessary and proportionate to address that root cause. But I think much of that's been addressed already by my client purchasing the business and wishing to take it forward, and removing the activity that seems to have given rise to attracting that type of clientele that's caused the trouble that they have, and they haven't been managed effectively. My client clearly indicates that she can do that, and we submit that to the committee to take proper cognizance of that in making their decision.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, and thank you, PC Reader and Mr. Aston Boff, for your assistance today. We will now go into to deliberate. So the committee lawyer and the committee manager, the members will go into private session while the subcommittee makes its decision. We will rejoin this meeting when we will announce a substantive decision of the subcommittee, with the full written reasons for the decision being sent out within 5 working days. So essentially, if you'll stay in the meeting, we will adjourn to our private session, and colleagues, will just be a 5-minute comfort break. What I propose to do is return to the public session at 10 to 12. I think that's the best way to do that. So we'll meet in the private session in 5 minutes, and thank you again to all those who've attended today. We'll adjourn this session, as I've said, to return later. Thank you.